Nicky, when we were talking about doing a second interview, you said you were particularly excited because you feel like you had, quote, grown into yourself and have more clarity about yourself as a collaborator. Do you care to elaborate on this?
Thanks for having me back. Since we last talked, I feel like I've really leveled up into myself in many ways. So I'm really excited to be here with you again. I think the last time we talked was right before the pandemic or during lockdown even.
Literally the day that the lockdown was called.
Yes, that's right. I was masking. I was very, very anxious and worried about everything, and I was trying to stay optimistic. The world as we know it changed, and I, at least, I can speak for myself, I pivoted to adapt and make more room for myself in the changing world. And I also was able to heal and work through a lot of things that I'm not sure I would have had the motivation or the opportunity, really, because sometimes you don't really know that you have a blockage until it blocks you. And the pandemic, for all the horrors that it wrought upon everyone, for me was also a transformative time that allowed me to grow. So I'm happy to be back. Thanks.
We're happy to have you back. Since we last spoke, you've moved a lot of your career into voiceover work. Was there anything that spurred that pivot?
What spurred that really was the pandemic. I had taken interest in voiceover for animation and video games. But it was really during the pandemic where I started working a lot in dubbing, and I got into audiobooks. A friend of mine suggested it, and I fell in love with it. You know, it really surprised me that I didn't fall in love with audiobooks sooner, because I majored in English and theater. So much of my undergraduate education has been in literature and performance together. It took a wild event, the pandemic, to confront me with the fact that I've always been really insecure about my voice. And I mean both spiritually, like, what am I saying, like with my art and my work, but also physically, like, you know, I'm non-binary, I'm trans-feminine, I have an androgynous sort of gender-expansive sound. And I had just assumed that there wasn't any space for that in a cis-het normative world. And I was just so elated to realize that, at least in the year 2020, there was room, and people were actively seeking more diverse voices and perspectives.
What do you love about doing voiceover?
I don't have to look like the characters that I'm playing. More and more companies and shows are devoted to authenticity in casting nowadays. But also, it's like, when you're just behind the mic, nobody cares what you look like, what you're wearing, how old you look, how large or small you look. It's all about how you sound, and how you sound is so much more connected to how you feel. In some ways, it's different. I wouldn't say it's better or worse, but it's a different way to act. As much as I love on camera and using my face and body with the character, and you do the same thing in voiceover, it's just that you're the only one that sees it. So you can do whatever it takes to get into the character without having to worry about it looking off.
And you're still able to get in a little eyebrow acting in the sound booth if you want. Nobody cares.
Oh, my eyebrows are all over the place in the sound booth and otherwise.
Is being queer an important element of your identity you pull from for your work in voiceover?
Yes, I definitely think that being queer is an important element that I pull from in my work, in voiceover and acting and everything. Something that I have discovered that I say a lot is that my non-binary trans voice isn't so much a sound as it is a perspective.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm glad it resonates.
Yeah.
It was a light bulb moment for me in my growth work during the pandemic, and kind of healing from my own self-limiting narratives. It really isn't so much in how I sound in a literal sense, but all the things in my heart and in my life and in my brain that that I bring to my work. Being queer was something that I have always been singled out and othered for, and people have tried to make me feel shame and make me invisible and shut me up. It's intrinsically connected to my identity as an artist that my queerness and my art are one and the same.
You've really made a name for yourself with your work in audiobooks. There are so many titles to choose from, but I thought we would focus on 2 titles. So, tell me about working on Toward Eternity by Anton Hur.
Toward Eternity by Anton Hur is my favorite book. I'm very lucky. Most of the books that I work on, I do genuinely love, and I fall in love. Maybe I romanticize it, but I'm very lucky that I've been cast really appropriately in the projects that I have. Toward Eternity is super special to me. It's described as a philosophical sci-fi, which is totally my jam, but also it deals with the theme of language as maybe culture's first technology, and how thought and language and identity and culture are all wrapped up with each other. And it's such a profoundly elegant, sophisticated, deep book, but it's presented in such an accessible, beautiful, economic way. Hur's writing is sublime. He's so talented. Well, he's a renowned translator, so hence, his interest in language, culture, thought, ideas, like meaning, right? I feel like I've gotten to know a little bit about him as an artist and as a writer and as a translator through this work in particular. But we also become friends, so it's, I was right, he's lovely. But I absolutely loved it. When I heard that Harper got the rights to produce the audiobook, I reached out to my contacts there and begged them for an audition. And it turns out that I was suggested, and the author loved my enthusiasm and what I could bring for it, and he cast me, and I get to play some characters that they're brilliant. My heart's in all of them, and if they ever do a limited series, I definitely want to audition for them as well.
Very cool. How many times would you say that you read the book before you start recording it? Is your preparation for doing this voiceover work any different from how you would break down a typical script?
So prepping an audiobook is not that different from prepping a script. I'd say the biggest difference is that unless it's a multicast and you're only responsible for one character, most of the time in audiobooks you're reading every character and you're reading the whole book as a narrator. So it's not just prepping one character and their point of view and their wants and needs, it's every single character that comes through the book. So that can be challenging, but also a lot of fun. So you want to read the book at least twice, once to prep it and look for all the different character journeys and relationships, if anyone has accents or if there's any surprises or anything that needs strong setup in the book. And then the second time, of course, you read it out loud in the microphone.
I'd love to hear more about your work on Chef's Choice by T.J. Alexander. Did you have to learn a French accent for the work, or did that come from your previous training?
I was approached by the producer at Simon & Schuster because I had studied French, and she asked if I was comfortable doing a French accent for the entire book for a lead character. I was daunted at first because it had been a while. I absolutely fell right into it. The cool thing about audiobooks is that accents need to be authentic enough to not be distracting, but they also can be a little bit anglicized for English audiobooks because clarity is the most important thing in an audiobook. So with film and television, we can have subtitles and we can have super authentic French people speaking French. But in an audiobook, if no one can understand what they're saying, it's too French for an English audiobook. So I was very happy to be able to supply a French accent that was easy to understand for English speakers.
Oh la la. Tell me about winning a Lambda Literary Award. How did that feel for you?
It felt so thrilling and humbling, and I was just really honored to receive the Lambda Literary Publishing Professionals Award this year. It normally goes to a producer or a bookstore or an editor or something, but this year they partnered with Spotify to promote audiobooks as a medium and to bring them more concretely into the theme of what Lambda Literary does, which is promote LGBTQIA+ literature. It was a surprise. It's not something, you submit for. I was chuffed to bits, as they say. And for me, it really ended up symbolizing something deeper. I can't say that I've ever really been run over by imposter syndrome. I'm not an artist because I care what people think about me. If anything, it's like I became an artist as a queer person to create that which was not available to me in the world. And so it's never been about being famous or being recognized. For better or for worse, to a certain degree, I kind of just don't care what people think about me. And receiving this award showed me the beautiful side of caring, that it doesn't have to come from a negative place. Growing up, I was bullied a lot, and so by not taking personally and internalizing that kind of shame and transphobia and homophobia and racism that was thrown at me growing up, I was able to psychologically survive and weather those storms. But this award showed me that it can be really important to be able to take in and receive beautiful feedback. When people say that someone is inspiring or that their work is contributing to movement in industry and that it's important to people, I never really considered how beautiful that is. And I'm so humbled and honored to have been invited to be recognized for that. It's helped me grow a lot as an artist, and I feel like I'm just at the beginning of another new chapter in embracing my leadership in artistic spaces and in meeting others that I want to collaborate with.
I loved your work on Strange Planet, creating multiple characters. Did you know about the comic beforehand, and can you tell me a bit about the experience?
I was a big fan of the comic Strange Planet before it was made into an animated television series. So I was thrilled when I found out that I got cast in it. When you audition for these things, everything has code names and everything's very secret. And sometimes they don't even give you the real script. So by the time I found out about it, I'm like, wait, I had auditioned for this? Oh, yes, you did. Which was great because it's like a double-blind experiment where I was just doing what I do and giving what I have to give without being too psyched out as a fan and getting in my head or trying too hard or whatever. Nathan W. Pyle's sense of humor and sense of humanity is just so wonderful and otherworldly. It's a unique take that's wry and self-aware, but not in a self-deprecating way, in a we're all in on the joke kind of way. It calls people in, it speaks to the commonality of the weirdness of being human. Yeah, it was my very first animated gig, so I was coming straight out of class, just trying to use my voice in different ways. I don't know how successful I was at it, but I certainly had a lot of fun, and all the people working on it were brilliant and so kind and had such a spirit of love for the project. So I'm really thrilled to have been part of it.
I think you succeeded for what it's worth. I was like, hey, I think that's Nicky.
We're always working to grow our retinue of voiced characters.
You also worked on a favorite show of Bi.org, Good Trouble. Can you tell me a little bit about working on Good Trouble?
I loved working on Good Trouble. I did end up getting cut out of most of my episode for time because it was a huge episode. There were all the guest stars. It was a big deal. Good Trouble also is the only show that I've been on that didn't make me cover up my tattoos. They really celebrate, everybody's individuality and authenticity. I've got friends on the show, and it was great. Actually, there was a bunch of crew people also working the episode that I was on that I had just worked on The Dropout with a few months prior. It felt like family. You've just got a family vibe going on, and everyone's really cool and down to earth, and it was just a brilliant time and a brilliant show. So I'm really glad to have gotten to be on it.
What would you like to see in the future of audiobook narration for yourself and for the community?
As much as needing a job got me into audiobooks, but it's such a great reason for me to stay, and in addition to just falling in love with the medium itself, is that in the audiobook world, there is a tangible effort, a palpable feeling of commitment to authenticity with authors and with narrators. Really finding the right voices for these stories is genuinely important. And it's aligned, not just in terms of representation and diversity, but also in our battle against AI, non-human things replacing, ironically, in art, what is the most human thing about us, which is our stories. Something that my friend and mentor, JP Karliak, who leads QueerVox, says is, we need to ask ourselves, is this our story to tell? And so often for queer people, our stories have been told or co-opted by people who shouldn't be telling our stories. In literature, there isn't the expectation that every single book needs to appeal to everyone, that there's more grace and more room for niche stories and niche projects to be what they are and be celebrated on their own merits. Not every book needs to be a bestseller, you know what I mean? But when you spend 40 million, 100 million, 200 million on a movie, it's gotta appeal to make that money back. And my continuing hope for the future is that we continue to be a leader in terms of artistic, also commercial industries that tell stories, that we do it as honestly and authentically as possible.
We've covered a lot, but if you could sum it up quickly, tell me as an artist, sort of like a too long didn't read, where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going.
That's a deep question, Jenny.
I know.
As an artist, where have I been, where am I now, and where am I going? I think from where I stand today, I'm going to tell a story of healing. I think in the past, as an artist, I was working so hard to tell the world who I was and to justify my right to be in it. And then I was given those opportunities, and I was able to establish and find my own voice. And now I think that it's time to turn it around and look outside of myself and see how I can help and collaborate with other artists and creatives to help them tell their stories. I've been thinking about getting into coaching and working with other artists and helping them find and develop their voice the way that I did.
What advice would you give to someone who is newly out as bi or queer? And or what advice do you wish you could have given yourself before you came out?
I think what I would tell someone who is just coming out as bi or as queer is to trust yourself, that whatever the voice is that's inside of you, whatever they're saying, it might not even have a language yet. It might not even have terminology or words, vocabulary that feel 100% like home yet. And that's okay. Just trust your gut feeling about who you are. And connect with community. I think if anything that the pandemic has taught me is how I took for granted community prior to not being able to connect with people face to face at least. But then also how many ways we can connect when we can't be face to face. It's amazing how you can crowdsource inspiration and imagination and vision, especially with other queer people. Alok, the poet, one of my favorite people, said something really brilliant about queer people always being the vanguard for culture. That we are creators, and whether or not we are identifying as artists or as artistic or whatever, that our very existence and our will to be is in itself a beautiful work of art.